making them a bomb now. Tell me, who turned on the alarm now? I got a message, we didn't put it in a song now. I'll see you later, all the haters got it wrong now. We're touching the lightning, we're coming alive, yeah. We feel it inside, yeah. We got the power. Yeah, come on. We got the power. Yeah, turn it up. We got the power. Come on, is everybody with me? It's time to get together, no more enemies. Throw your hands up, can you feel the energy? Yeah, come on, can you finally hear what this means? 20-something years been chasing down this street, running like a wild man, going since 15. Yeah, we're touching the lightning, we're coming alive, yeah. We feel it inside, yeah. We got the power. Yeah, come on. We got the power. Woo. Yeah, get it turned up. We got the power. We're touching the lightning, we're coming alive, yeah. We feel it inside, yeah. We feel it inside, yeah. We're touching the lightning, we're coming alive, yeah. We got the power. We got the power. Yeah, let's go now. We got the power. Let's get it. We got the power. Tell me, is this thing on now? I've been working long like a marathon now. Tying up words, making them a bomb now. Tell me, who turned on the alarm now? I got a message, we didn't put it in a song now. I'll see you later, all the haters got it wrong now. We're touching the lightning, we're coming alive, yeah. We feel it inside, yeah. We got the power. Yeah, come on. We got the power. Yeah, turn it up. We got the power. Come on, is everybody with me? It's time to get together, no more enemies. Throw your hands up, can you feel the energy? Yeah, come on, can you finally hear what this means? 20-something years been chasing down this street, running like a wild man, going since 15. Yeah, we're touching the lightning, we're coming alive, yeah. We feel it inside, yeah. We got the power. Yeah, come on. We got upwards, making them a bomb now. Tell me, who turned on the alarm now? I got a message when they put it in a song now. I'll see you later, all the haters got it wrong now. We're touching the lightning, we're coming alive, yeah. We feel it inside, yeah. We got the power. Yeah, come on. We got the power. Yeah, turn it up. We got the power. Come on, is everybody with me? It's time to get together, no more enemies. Throw your hands up, can you feel the energy? Yeah, come on, can you finally hear what this means? 20-something years been chasing down this street, running like a wild man, going since 15. Yeah, we're touching the lightning, we're coming alive, yeah. We're feeling inside, yeah. We got the power. Yeah, come on. We got the power. Woo. Yeah, get it turned up. We got the power. We're touching the lightning, we're coming alive, yeah. Feel it inside, yeah. Feel it inside, yeah. We're touching the lightning, we're coming alive, yeah. We got the power. We got the power. Yeah, let's go now. We got the power. Let's get it. We got the power. Tell me, is this thing on now? I've been working long like a marathon now. Tying up words, making them a bomb now. Tell me, who turned on the alarm now? I got a message when they put it in a song now. I'll see you later, all the haters got it wrong now. We're touching the lightning, we're coming alive, yeah. We feel it inside, yeah. We got the power. Yeah, come on. We got the power. Yeah, turn it up. We got the power. Come on, is everybody with me? It's time to get together, no more enemies. Throw your hands up, can you feel the energy? Yeah, come on, can you finally hear what this means? 20-something years been chasing down this street, running like a wild man, going since 15. Yeah, we're touching the lightning, we're coming alive, yeah. We're feeling inside, yeah. We got the power. Yeah, come on. We got upwards, making them a bomb now. Tell me, who turned on the alarm now? I got a message when they put it in a song now. I'll see you later, all the haters got it wrong now. We're touching the lightning, we're coming alive, yeah. We feel it inside, yeah. We got the power. Yeah, come on. We got the power. Yeah, turn it up. We got the power. Come on, is everybody with me? It's time to get together, no more enemies. Throw your hands up, can you feel the energy? Yeah, come on, can you finally hear what this means? 20-something years been chasing down this street, running like a wild man, going since 15. Yeah, we're touching the lightning, we're coming alive, yeah. We're feeling inside, yeah. We got the power. Yeah, come on. We got the power. Woo. Yeah, get it turned up. We got the power. We're touching the lightning, we're coming alive, yeah. Feel it inside, yeah. Feel it inside, yeah. We're touching the lightning, we're coming alive, yeah. We got the power. We got the power. Yeah, let's go now. We got the power. Let's get it. We got the power. Tell me, is this thing on now? I've been working long like a marathon now. Tying upwards, making them a bomb now. Tell me, who turned on the alarm now? I got a message when they put it in a song now. I'll see you later, all the haters got it wrong now. We're touching the lightning, we're coming alive, yeah. We feel it inside, yeah. We got the power. Yeah, come on. We got the power. Yeah, turn it up. We got the power. Come on, is everybody with me? It's time to get together, no more enemies. Throw your hands up, can you feel the energy? Yeah, come on, can you finally hear what this means? 20-something years been chasing down this street, running like a wild man, going since 15. Yeah, we're touching the lightning, we're coming alive, yeah. We're feeling inside, yeah. We got the power. Yeah, come on. We got making them a bomb now. Tell me, who turned on the alarm now? I got a message when they put it in a song now. I see you later, all the haters got it wrong now. We're touching the lightning, we're coming alive, yeah. We feel it inside, yeah. We got the power. Yeah, come on. We got the power. Yeah, turn it up. We got the power. Come on, is everybody with me? It's time to get together, no more enemies. Throw your hands up, can you feel the energy? Yeah, come on, can you finally hear what this means? 20-something years been chasing down this street, running like a wild man, going since 15. Yeah, we're touching the lightning, we're coming alive, yeah. We feel it inside, yeah. We got the power. Yeah, come on. We got the power. Woo. Yeah, get it turned up. We got the power. We're touching the lightning, we're coming alive, yeah. Feel it inside, yeah. Feel it inside, yeah. We're touching the lightning, we're coming alive, yeah. We got the power. We got the power. Yeah, let's go now. We got the power. Let's get it. We got the power. Tell me, is this thing on now? I've been working long like a marathon now. Tying up words, making them a bomb now. Tell me, who turned on the alarm now? I got a message when they put it in a song now. I see you later, all the haters got it wrong now. We're touching the lightning, we're coming alive, yeah. We feel it inside, yeah. We got the power. Yeah, come on. We got the power. Yeah, turn it up. We marathon now. Tying up words, making them a bomb now. Tell me, who turned on the alarm now? I got a message, we didn't put it in a song now. I'll see you later, all the haters got it wrong now. We're touching the lightning, we're coming alive, yeah. We're feeling inside, yeah. We got the power. Yeah, come on. We got the power. Yeah, turn it up. We got the power. Come on, is everybody with me? It's time to get together, no more enemies. Throw your hands up, can you feel the energy? Yeah, come on, can you finally hear what this means? 20-something years been chasing down this street, running like a wild man, going since 15. Yeah, we're touching the lightning, we're coming alive, yeah. We're feeling inside, yeah. We got the power. Yeah, come on. We got the power. Woo. Yeah, get it turned up. We got the power. We're touching the lightning, we're coming alive, yeah. We're feeling inside, yeah. We're feeling inside, yeah. We're touching the lightning, we're coming alive, yeah. We got the power. We got the power. Yeah, let's go now. We got the power. Let's get it. We got the power. Tell me, is this thing on now? I've been working long like a marathon now. Tying up words, making them a bomb now. Tell me, who turned on the alarm now? I got a message, we didn't put it in a song now. I'll see you later, all the haters got it wrong now. We're touching the lightning, we're coming alive, yeah. We're feeling inside, yeah. We got the power. Yeah, come on. We got the power. Yeah, turn it up. We like a marathon now. Tying up words, making them a bomb now. Tell me, who turned on the alarm now? I got a message, we didn't put it in a song now. I'll see you later, all the haters got it wrong now. We're touching the lightning, we're coming alive, yeah. We're feeling inside, yeah. We got the power. Yeah, come on. We got the power. Yeah, turn it up. We got the power. Come on, is everybody with me? It's time to get together, no more enemies. Throw your hands up, can you feel the energy? Yeah, come on, can you finally hear what this means? 20-something years been chasing down this street, running like a wild man, going since 15. Yeah, we're touching the lightning, we're coming alive, yeah. We're feeling inside, yeah. We got the power. Yeah, come on. We got the power. Woo. Yeah, get it turned up. We got the power. We're touching the lightning, we're coming alive, yeah. We're feeling inside, yeah. We're feeling inside, yeah. We're touching the lightning, we're coming alive, yeah. We got the power. We got the power. Yeah, let's go now. We got the power. Let's get it. We got the power. Tell me, is this thing on now? I've been working long like a marathon now. Tying up words, making them a bomb now. Tell me, who turned on the alarm now? I got a message, we didn't put it in a song now. I'll see you later, all the haters got it wrong now. We're touching the lightning, we're coming alive, yeah. We're feeling inside, yeah. We got the power. Yeah, come on. We got the power. Yeah, turn it up. thing on now. I've been walking long like a marathon now. Tying up words, making them a bomb now. Tell me, who turned on the alarm now? I got a message, we didn't put it in a song now. I'll see you later, all the haters got it wrong now. We're touching the lightning, we're coming alive, yeah. We're feeling inside, yeah. We got the power. Yeah, come on. We got the power. Yeah, turn it up. We got the power. Come on, is everybody with me? It's time to get together, no more enemies. Throw your hands up, can you feel the energy? Yeah, come on, can you finally hear what this means? 20-something years been chasing down this street, running like a wild man, going since 15.
Okay. Hello, everybody. Okay, sorry about that, folks. Just quickly fixing an issue. So, okay. My name's Chris Murphy. I'm an Unreal Engine evangelist, and we're going to be running through the Unreal Engine Short Film Challenge today. Now, I've run one of these sessions already. And that was earlier today. This is a repeat of the session. However, we wanted to run these multiple times and not just kind of send everybody the replay, because we wanted to still be able to answer everyone's Q&A as we went about, going through all of this. Now, today's session is going to be focusing on a general overview of the program, as well as a quick whistle-stop tour of virtual production and real-time animation inside of Unreal. So this is going to be a pretty high-level talk for the most part, but the webinars that follow on from this one will be live development. So while this one is a presentation, everything after this is purely live development. And as we do those sessions, we'll be actually building things and explaining how things work and demonstrating how stuff kind of goes together and everything like that. So let's go ahead and let's get started. So as I said, it's going to be kind of a high-level overview, but for this, we're going to be going through, first off, a program overview. We're following that up with just, who is Epic Games and what is an Unreal Engine. We're going to be stepping through real-time animation and then virtual production, and of course, we're going to be looking at where to next. Now, for this, the first thing to kind of address, actually, before I go into that, I do want to just quickly apologize for something. We did have some issues with the technical side of this in the last couple of days. What happened is when we announced, we actually had roughly 5 times as many people sign up for this as expected, maybe more. So all of a sudden, our learning management systems and things like that we had kind of intended on using were no longer going to really cater to the number of users that we were expecting to come in. So my apologies for that, but hopefully everyone's been able to find the right links and get on board now. So without further ado, let's step through this. Now, the first thing to look at is stepping through the Unreal Short Film Contest itself. Okay, so this is reasonably straightforward as far as the general terms. It's Australian applicants only. You need to create a pitch for a short film using Unreal Engine. The best candidates for that will be shortlisted, and a final winner will be chosen for every state. Then each state's winning candidates will receive $20,000 to develop and produce their short film. Then after that, finalists will have their shorts judged, with the winner taking home a grand prize of $50,000 Australian, while participants should apply to the challenge via their state screen agency. So for instance, in Victoria, you would apply directly to Film Victoria, etc., etc. So let's quickly step over a few key dates and things to just generally be aware of. Now, the first of these is training. So the first of this is starting today, which is running from the 11th until the 21st of August. We will be running these online, and I really want to stress that at the end of every session we have Q&A. So if you do have any questions there, or if you do have any questions with regards to how to put things together, etc., then that's the best avenue to kind of do so. The best thing to kind of look at from here, though, is come to the sessions, ask questions as necessary, and for whatever you can do, feel free to reach out to us afterwards. So as best as you can, kind of just generally get an overview of the learning from here. I'll do my best to point you towards resources for after the training, but we'll also open ourselves up to additional questions from here. My apologies, I had to quickly disable something just then, I was a little distracted. Now, after the training side of things, we're going to be having the application process. So the applications close on the 31st of August, but I do want to stress that the applications close on the 31st and they're actually open now. So if you feel like you're ready to submit your application, you have a general idea of what it is that you want to put through, nothing's really stopping you. So it's up to you as to how you kind of want to, how you want to generally go through this. But there's no harm in leaving it to the last minute either, as long as it actually gets in. After this, though, we go through application review, and successful applicants will be announced on the 5th of October. Now, officially production begins on the 19th of October, but it's really up to you as to when you want to start. If you start prototyping something now for your pitch and you get a general idea of what it is you want to put through early, there's no harm in building from that prototype that you developed early. So I just want to be clear that, you know, we're not going to be opening up anyone's like subversion or Perforce folders or anything and looking at it and being like, whoa, you started October 18th. So don't stress too much on that front. But that is the official window that we're kind of doing the contest, and we're generally trying to keep to that. But it's up to you how you want to approach this problem. Next up, finished product submissions will be the 30th of November. So the actual submissions for everything has to have been completely and finally pushed in by that point. Only Epic is involved in the selection of the grand prize winner. And then finally, the winner is announced on the 14th of December. So, ideally, we'll be able to work towards getting something earlier than that, but we'll see how we go. 14th of December is the latest that we'll be doing that announcement. So as far as what we're announcing, as far as what we're expecting, there's a few things here. First off, creativity. So when we created this program, we deliberately avoided certain limitations that would stifle creativity, and we're generally here to help you realize it. While there are some restrictions, obviously the final output has to be coming from Unreal in some capacity, but where possible, we've deliberately tried to be a little vague on certain restrictions so that you can kind of develop what you want to develop as best as possible. Now, vision. So we want you to kind of create something that you can work with going forward. Epic doesn't take equity or any rights to your creation because we want you to be able to use your short film to go into something bigger. And that doesn't necessarily mean, hey, you're building the same IP again. But something that you can use as a foundation for potential future virtual production endeavors is never going to be frowned upon. Next up is just realistic planning. So don't try to compress a 12-minute short film into 5. Don't work on reasonable hours, plan accordingly. There's a fair bit of time. I know the core development there is 6 weeks, but it's 6 weeks without the rendering times that a lot of animators may be used to. And there's a lot you can kind of get your head around beforehand. So where possible, when you're pitching, remember to pitch what you're making, why you think you can make it in that time, etc., etc. Again, like I said this before, but just ask questions. So what I mean by that is just I'll give you an email address at the end that you can reach out with. Feel free to ask questions and reach directly out to the team. we're going to do our best to kind of point you towards various resources and communities that you can get in touch with. The obviously the forums and the official means are always there, but there's a couple of Facebook groups and an Oceanic Discord server that are really, really useful. So, reaching out to folks in that capacity is always useful. But as I said, asking questions of the team as well is very important. If you want to get a sanity check on your submission, feel free to reach out and we'll do our best to kind of get back to you on that one. I'll be giving out an email address at the end that goes through to the whole team, so you can just generally ask questions out that way. Obviously, don't try and plague it with every little thing, but if you're trying to get some eyes on your project and you're just like, hey, is this definitely doable? And can I use this engine feature in this way, or is this going to be terrible? Feel free to strike up conversations like that, and we can have those where necessary. So before I go any further, I think it's a good time to give you a quick bit of background on Epic and Unreal Engine. So just let you know where all of this is coming from. And I guess I kind of want to roll back to ZZT, which was a game made by Tim Sweeney and Epic, which at the time was Potomac Inc. in 1991. And this was an interesting little game. It allowed community involvement that extended beyond like simply creating level terrain with a built-in editor. And if you scroll forward, a couple of years, you get to 1998, and there was a bunch of games in between these two. Don't get me wrong, but this was the release of Unreal. And Unreal was really that step into the GPU era, so to speak. So this is kind of interesting because Unreal itself was built on top of the foundation of the Unreal Engine. And over the years, the Unreal Engine as a foundation has matured and been developed further. So what I mean by that is, you've got higher and higher fidelity projects starting to come around, reaching out to a range of platforms, including mobile. And then over the years, that general kind of quality markers continue to rise, and what we can squeeze out of GPUs and CPUs is getting better. But as well as that, the tool set has really just kept maturing and maturing. Now, I bring this up because it's really kind of coming along, and we've gotten to this point where the tool set itself is a seriously comprehensive tool set, and that is that you've got a massive amount of things that are required to get a fully interactive real-time experience out the door, which means you need to have world building and animation and rendering and lighting and simulation and platform support and everything else. But this all kind of has to be built into the one space. And I'm bringing this all up not so much to hype you over Unreal as much as it is to kind of paint a picture as how this ultimately ties into other spaces. But to give clarity as to how this works, Unreal itself is free for creators, and when I say free for creators, the terms work like this. If you're exclusively exporting images and video, there is no royalty attached. For software and binary builds, there's a 5% royalty after your first $1 million of gross revenue per product, if you're selling it as software or a game or anything like that. Additional paid customer support is available from Epic as well. But you're welcome to check out the EULA and see how this would apply to your business. But I bring up this free side of things because this free side of things directly ties into one aspect that also helps understand where Unreal is coming from. And that is the source code availability. And that is that you can download this and you can actually recompile the entire engine. But you can make changes to the engine as you see fit. And you're even able to suggest those changes back to the team. So if you actually find that, hey, there's a bug in this renderer, or hey, this little feature seems like would be really useful to a lot of people, you're welcome to suggest that as a feature. So you can actually make requests on Git and suggestions to kind of pull back there. So you can be like, hey, this line of code does this, etc., etc. And what this means is, it's not this kind of traditional closed off software that you may be used to. It's not like there are purely fixed features and that users have no control over the future, but rather that this is a Epic building the core engine, but there is that public contribution, which I think is really exciting. because it lets it more easily kind of step into different areas. Now, let's step away from games for a moment and let's paint a really quick picture. And that is, I want you to think about the pre-digital years where the director and your DPs were the creative core of films. We're talking back in the day when maybe proper large-scale sets, or it may be model design or anything like that. But things had to be developed by the time things were shot, so there was kind of that creative element really leading up and all the way through it. And then, as things evolved, we improved in fidelity, and you get things like The Matrix starting to pop up. But, I've used The Matrix here as an example, but, this is everything from, like, your Terminators and Matrixes and Men in Blacks. You look at that era since, like, The Abyss and VFX went nuts, right? And it's wonderful, but it also meant that there was kind of a shift. A lot of things were being filmed when actors couldn't see what was going on, and the creatives didn't really have that full level of control. And the phrase "fix it in post" was really, it became very much dominant. And it's important to consider with where this discussion of virtual production goes, because what if the game engine was thought of as a real-time engine, and our game levels were virtual worlds? Okay, if that's the case, then what if we got those worlds and we filmed something there? And that's where a feature like Sequencer comes in. So Sequencer is Unreal Engine's cinematic tool. We can scrub through, we can view the properties of any actor at any given point, and of course we're given immediate feedback that is like the actual final output quality if we wanted it to be straight from the viewport. There's no delay. Because we need to be able to push this out immediately. And, while tools like this are generally viewed as being game cinematics, as the fidelity is increasing in these, in this technology, it's becoming less and less game cinematics and becoming more and more something that we can use in VFX across the board and in filmmaking across the board. And I think this is really exciting, and this is what we're kind of going to step through for a little bit here. So the first of these, things that may come to mind is like your animatics and your previs, and that was really where it started, because you could get away with lower fidelity there. But over time, it's really grown to be in-camera effects, real-time VFX. We have multi-user collaboration, and ultimately, what it means is that the creative center of gravity is shifting back onto the set. It's less being postponed afterwards and more being pulled back onto the set. And I think that's really exciting. Because the other thing to kind of bring up here is if you're using the one technology to push out your images and your movies and your games and everything else, it keeps a consistency and coherency in the brand in general, which has some obvious benefits to anyone that's developing a portfolio for a customer or developing an IP or whatever it may be. When I know that I can pull my character straight from the poster into a game, into a movie, etc., that's a really exciting proposition across the board. So I do keep using this word a bit, but I keep saying virtual production. And virtual production, just to clarify, is essentially where digital and physical spaces meet in filmmaking. And it's worth noting that virtual production can really happen either the whole way through, or it can happen at different distinctive stages. Virtual production might be being used in that early point, but virtual production may be the entire way that animation was developed from start to finish. So let's take a look at what this kind of means. And first off, I'm going to step into real-time animation.
Just finished animation, and 10 minutes later I get to see the shot rendered. I'm in.
I've never worried so little about rendering on a project, ever.
I think my only regret is that it took us so long to say yes and do it.
So that was Safari, which is a really lovely little project. They're able to smash out many episodes at a really high fidelity, and it's a super impressive endeavor by the team. But I kind of wanted to bring that up as just a kind of an understanding of, you can still keep a nice level of stylization, and you can have some really interesting projects coming out. But let's move on and let's take a look at what that animation means in context, right? So if you think of your typical animation studio pipeline and how things are set up and how it all flows together, your editorial is really in that earlier phase. Things are kind of getting developed there, but for the most part, you're kind of setting things up like dominoes. You're building things early, and you're planning things out, because eventually each layer, each comp layer is going to get passed to the next and onto the next and onto the next. So things really need to be right from the start. And if later on down the track you're like, oh, I wish we could have had this camera angle from here instead, that's a big ask. But this is kind of interesting, because what we end up with is, in a real-time animation studio pipeline, we start looking at Sequencer as really becoming that creative hub. And I think with Sequencer becoming that creative hub, you're starting to kind of move that process further down the track. Now, it's possible that, there are still plenty of people that are using Unreal for 90% of their VFX level, and then they're kind of pushing things out at the very end by doing some touch-ups here and there. And that may be the choice that some studios choose to go, but there are plenty of others that are pushing straight out of UE as well. And I think as long as that's the case, it means that you've got this kind of early creative hub, things are staying inside the same system, and right up until pretty late in the picture, you've got creative control and things can be adjusted without kind of causing as many problems. And now what this kind of general pipeline, the concept of a real-time pipeline means is, well, first off, real-time means we're outputting every frame in 33.3 milliseconds. And for any of the animators out there or anyone that's ever had to click the render button, I'm sure you know that 33.3 milliseconds is pretty quick. And this is exciting. There's no more of like, all right, I'll hit render and then I'll go take a coffee break or whatever. Although that is a really good excuse to drink coffee, so I understand. And if we look at beyond that, it means that this pipeline is interactive. So it's able to be modified, expanded, or altered dynamically. It means this pipeline is immersive. So we can provide a high level of engagement that's equal to or greater than current animation standards. It means that it's non-linear. So we're able to iteratively develop without concern for a linear process. And what I mean by that is, because everything is kind of sitting within that Unreal Engine scene, there's no reason that someone can't be working on the effects for the protagonist, while someone else is still working on the model. So something can be at the high quality point, something else can be at the low quality point. Different people can be brushing up different things at the same time, because we're not really worried so much about passes being pushed on to one another. So there's a lot more kind of creative control in building the final scene, and having prototype elements wherever necessary up until the point that you can be swapping them out and such. But it also means that it's customizable. So it means that we can develop content that can be easily tweaked or fully modified at a director or potentially a viewer's discretion. Now, I'm going to step through a couple of tools that really help facilitate this. The first of these is LiveLink. Now, LiveLink is a tool that we have that allows you to stream data straight into Unreal from certain other applications. So in this case, we have Maya, and as the animation is being done in Maya, that is actually being directly brought into UE live. Now, as that's being brought in, Unreal is actually running all of its additional layers on top of it. So what I mean by that is any physics assets or any particle effects or things like that you want working, you can have Unreal open in one monitor while you're animating in Maya, and you can go straight into it. And this is really exciting because you can just record these animations live, and you can do the same thing with motion capture data. So as the mocap data is coming in, you can literally see it in Unreal. You can be mocapping it and recording it straight in as you desire. Now, the next thing I wanted to bring up was virtual cameras, because virtual cameras allow us to output the image on the screen to an iPad or an iPhone, and we can then take all of the translation data and we can put that back into the engine live. So what that actually means is, in this situation, you could see I recorded some quick footage of actual in the game using my iPad as a camera, at which point Sequencer can open that up and I can immediately just scrub through that entire track. And I think that kind of setup in general is a really exciting thing, because it means we can start taking physical, practical tools into a virtual environment. Now, the next one's in its early days, I will admit, but it's definitely coming along, and that's Control Rig. So Control Rig is in-engine rigging, so you can actually rig and animate inside the engine now. Don't get me wrong, if you're an absolute pro in Maya or Max or Blender or whatever your choice is, you can still stick with that. But at the same time, I know plenty of other devs who have been handed something, and quite often they're like, wow, I really wish I could just change this animation slightly, or tweak this, or extend this, or add this one extra pose, or add this one extra intermission animation between two things. And control rig's really great for anything from that to up to full animation. And it's gonna keep getting better and better as well as we keep pushing the tool. So control rig is early days, but I think a really exciting prospect for that animatic side. The next thing to kind of look at is multi-user collaboration. So this is something that's been built in the engine for a little while, and a lot of folks actually don't know you can do it. But you can actually run Unreal's editor essentially as multiplayer. And what that means is, in this situation, you can literally see the other users moving through the world. And what's cool about that is as they move through the world, they can edit it and change things, and they can modify things, as they see fit, but they can work in this environment collaboratively. And what's interesting is they don't need to be inside the same type of editor. And what I mean by that is Unreal Engine actually has a VR editor built in. So you can walk through the space in VR, pick things up, change things as you see fit. But I could have someone in the same room as me, where someone's on a regular computer and someone's experiencing it as an actor might, or as the character might, and moving through it, picking things up and changing things around. And they can do this together in a live environment. So if the VR person is going to have something fiddly, they can call out to the other person. They can be like, hey, can you move this across? Can you change this for me? Etc., etc. And I think that's a really exciting thing, because we can start developing these in a far more collaborative way. So next up is just generally looking at the rest of film and television. And there's a lot of use cases as to where this comes up. You've got virtual sets, VR scouting, pre-visualization, in-camera visual effects, digital humans, and final rendering. And before I go on to the next thing, I do want to stress one thing, which is that Unreal's been used in over 120 film and TV projects since 2016. So this is very much taking off, very much being used, in all sorts of ways. And it is... Honestly, it's actually a really exciting time, because virtual production, was a dream only 10, 15 years ago, and it's really kind of getting to that point. So let's have a step through some of these more film and television specific kind of things. And I'm going to look at virtual scouting and previs.
I came on John Wick as a concept illustrator. I was providing 2D concept art to design the look and the feel of the film. And when we read about a 3-story building entirely made of glass, a number of problems come to mind. You have the reflections, you have the actual structural design of something like this, then you have the look to figure out lighting, etc. So I basically started with concept art using CAD designs from a set designer. I was able to bring them into Unreal Engine so that we could explore it in VR. It became this tool that allowed us to visualize what this set looked like, and also helped us to create the lighting and the design of this thing months and months before any decisions had to be made on the physical set. It was such an abstract set that having this kind of spatial relationship and visualizing it from that point of view had tons of value. This set became a hub in the art department. The actors, the directors, the cinematographers went into the VR model so that they could basically visualize everything that was going to be built and seen in the film. I can't imagine them doing this set without VR. This set went through a number of different budgetary designs. I was able to create different set designs within VR, and now suddenly they can see what they can live with and what they can't live with at the hit of a button, and that allowed us to get the set approved sooner than we normally would. When you first walk onto the physical set, it's a surreal experience. It was amazingly accurate. VR has this kind of ability to cross the 2D concept art threshold and set design threshold and give you a real feeling of what it's going to be like to be there, which is just an incredible disruption in this industry. I came onto the project, 2D artist, and in the end I was a VR developer. The guys at Epic have done an incredible job at making it an easily learnable program, and just being able to quickly and efficiently make something look good in such a minimal amount of time is incredible. So I feel like VR has a permanent place in design, film design, production design. But I also believe that the future is really bright for real time. Every single VFX artist that I know is asking about Unreal Engine. And the reason why is because there's the satisfaction of not hitting that render button, but just seeing it in real time. It's like heaven for a VFX artist.
So when we look at what was going on there, there was a lot of virtual scouting. And I'm sure, plenty of people look at that and they're like, oh, that seems really great. That seems really useful. That sounds like it requires a lot of programming work, though. And the cool thing is honestly, the virtual scouting tools are built into the engine. So you have to turn them on. So you may not have found them if you're already a UE user. But you can open the virtual scouting tools you can open the virtual scouting tools through the plugins menu. You can just enable them and you can immediately start using your VR setup to kind of work through it. And it's great because, they really give filmmakers new ways to navigate and interact in virtual production environments. And that means that it helps them make better creative decisions. Your directors and your DOPs can easily find locations, they can compose shots, they can set up scene blocking, and they can get accurate representations of filming locations. Artists and set designers can kind of experience a location in VR while building it, and they can use measurement interaction tools to check distances, modify the world, etc., etc. So this tool set's really, really powerful, and it can be used by a range of people inside of development. Next up is Take Recorder. So before I mentioned that we could do mocap straight into the engine, but one of the really cool things is with Take Recorder, you can essentially just run that mocap and just keep hitting take 1, take 2, take 3, take 4, take 5, and then you can kind of scrub back through all of those takes. So as you're kind of recording that information in, you can just really easily kind of just create a batch of them. Each one gets automatically put into its own little sequence. You can flick between different takes, and then later on, if you want to, you could copy some data out of one take into the setup for another take. You could be like, hey, I want to get the facial animation from this one, but some of the body movement from this one, etc., etc. And again, I think that as the ultimate future of where a lot of this stuff is going for mocap is really exciting, because it means that your mocap artists are doing their thing while everyone else can see what the final reality of that really looks like on screen. They're mocapping directly into final pixel quality. And Take Recorder really, really helps facilitate that. So I wanted to flag it. Now, before I mentioned set designers as one group that the virtual scouting tools are really powerful for, and because of that, I kind of wanted to just mention LiDAR support. So if you have any LiDAR data of a scene, or you take some, you can actually just drop that point cloud data straight into the scene, and when you drag it into the scene, you can then use that as a way of kind of experiencing it and previewing it without necessarily having to have the fully meshed out scene itself. And you could be meshing out and building the environment around it, but this serves as a really great starting point for a lot of those environments. You can just bring one device into a scene, capture it, set it up, and then experience it and move on with your life. So the next topic I want to cover is in-camera effects, and specifically, looking at in-camera virtual production. And I'll once again pass this off to someone else.
Part of what's been fun about collaborating on The Mandalorian with Lucasfilm and Disney is that we have been able to see through a few technical innovations and a few firsts that I think are going to have a lot of impact on the way television and movies are made moving forward. In partnership with ILM and Epic, we have put together a system whereby which we can have game engine, real-time render, and video wall technology coming together to create a backdrop for the big, beautiful world of Star Wars.
The volume is 21 feet tall, it's 75 feet in diameter, run by 7 machines, pumping the visuals onto the screen that's being created in pre-production and can be on the screen within 24 hours of being finalized.
It's incredibly impressive when you first walk out there because it completely surrounds your peripheral vision. And you really quickly forget that you're indoors and you're not out on some planet's surface. It feels like a real three-dimensional environment surrounding you because it is a three-dimensional environment.
You can allow your key creatives to all make decisions together so that the shots are captured entirely in camera, which allows for a better performance.
And what was so exciting about this is by bringing those people together, things started to click, and we started to realize, well, let's not just do green screen and interactive light. If we're going to design the whole set and game engine ahead of time, maybe we could have some in-camera effects.
Everything in the volume is designed to both light the actors and to be a background that we can directly photograph. So you end up with real-time final pixels in camera.
If you look at visual effects heavy films, you've got a film set and then it's going to go to post and it's going to get the world put in. Here we're considering all of that at the same time, and how do we create a background and foreground that live together on the volume harmoniously.
When we started to play with the idea of using Unreal Engine for virtual production, that's one of the things that Richard and John started to embrace, is that you've got this very dynamic world where you can have randomization of things and find the happy accident that gives you the perfect shot. Being able to see the actors point at things and see what they're looking at was pretty transformative. It gave everybody context, with the added benefit that if you want to move a mountain from there to there, you can do it instantly.
You could switch between the Iceland location to the desert location, all within the same day of shooting.
The ability to shoot a 10-hour dawn is extraordinary. To shoot any sequence where you say, oh, this world's not quite right, let's just move it a little bit. An extraordinary number of benefits and advantages for shooting in that environment. It's mind-blowing what that tool is.
What you see is really what you get. And that's something that really means a lot to filmmakers, especially those who have worked with a more traditional approach in the past.
Shots of character in a vehicle traveling through a complex environment is always very difficult to do believably on stage. LED screens are a wonderful solution to that problem, because what you're doing is you're taking this technique of image-based lighting that we've been using in computer graphics for years, and use it to light a subject.
And then we would do shoots where we would texture map real lit surfaces onto our game engine Geo, and so the camera could move anywhere. We would do interiors, like Werner Herzog's office. And then you started doing things like building sets into it, having half a spaceship with reflective surfaces. And so it became exciting, because by the end of the season, it was like, let's start designing sets around what this could do well.
Just like the good old days.
With Star Wars, we're building on a rich legacy of innovation, and getting to partner with Jon Favreau to make his ambitious vision a reality, it's really a game changer for filmmaking.
Now, I think this is really exciting because, you know, you can clearly see the immediate use of it, right? But I think as this is kind of coming in, you know, we can see in an example like this, it could be used on large scale or smaller scale. And you got to remember that things like this could potentially be extended to not necessarily need to be the entire set. You know, if I was making a research lab, there's no reason that doorways or whatever else could potentially just be screens that are reprojecting whatever we wanted at that location. You know, you could use it in a large scale or a small scale. But let's look at some of the tools that allow this to be possible. And the first of these doesn't sound like a thing that I would get excited about, and that is remote control over HTTP. And what this actually lets you do is create little web pages. And those little web pages are actually little customized user interfaces for projects. So what this means is you can actually set up a web page that is just controlling the stage lighting. You know, so it's just controlling the lighting, or it's just controlling the environment, or whatever else. And you can hand this to someone on an iPad or an iPhone or whatever else. And you can essentially say, here, you know, these are the tools that you're allowed to, you know, that you should be using for your role. And I bring this up because it means that when you're proposing a tool to be on set, I think it's important that we address that not everyone's going to be an expert in that tool. So having remote control over HTTP allows you to facilitate plenty of different people coming from plenty of different disciplines, from plenty of different backgrounds, to still be able to work with a real-time tool while allowing that one or two people on set to kind of do what they want to with UE. The next thing to discuss here is end display. So when you look at a large in-camera effect setup, you need to have a pretty high resolution, and chances are you're not going to be able to get that resolution from one machine. So end display is actually Unreal's mechanism for setting up multiple screens to be tied to multiple computers that are all kind of just sharing the main load. They're all just sharing the rendering effort with each other to output real time to quite a high number of screens. Now the next thing to touch on is just composure. So we have real-time compositing built into the engine, and I bring this up because when you combine real-time compositing with your in-camera setups, then what you actually end up with is the ability to project a green screen behind where someone is, but keep the rest of the TVs active. Now this means that the reflections stay great, while simultaneously you're able to still do that fixing in post if you really want to. So you can kind of meet somewhere in the middle. Now, as far as other tools that are worth kind of flagging for this discussion, just things that I want to make sure people are aware of. First off, I want to quickly just touch on pipeline integration. You can import, FBX or whatever else, or USD, straight into Unreal, but it's worth noting that we also have a setup called Datasmith. And Datasmith allows you to actually bring assets in from Rhino, from Revit, from SolidWorks, from whatever else it may be. And it actually automatically cleans them up and does a lot of stuff to try and keep things together. It tries to kind of make those assets more real-time ready, I guess you could say, which is definitely handy. It's the kind of thing that traditionally you would have had to have assigned various people to do. Would have taken quite a lot of work. So when we can kind of automate that process, it really saves a lot of time and lets your artists focus on doing the more creative and important stuff than necessarily trying to convert from one application to another. Now, I mentioned USD before. For any developers that are joining in that happen to use USD in-house already, if you're unfamiliar with it, USD is it's a format that was developed by Pixar, and it's now supported natively in Unreal Engine. So you can kind of just directly open your USD setups and set things up as you see fit. This is really important because it means that a lot of studios don't have to really fully change their workflow in a way that they may have expected to. The next thing for me to touch on here is Quixel. So Quixel is made up of a few things. You've got the Megascans, which is a huge library of, as it says on the screen, thousands of assets. Essentially, there are people that are going all around the world just scanning assets over and over and over again, and they're building up this massive repository. And then you can actually browse through them in another tool called Bridge. So when you open up Bridge, you're able to look through all of the scanned assets, and you can see different LODs for each one. You can see, hey, I want to get this asset with this texture and this texture and this texture, but I don't really care about the bump map, or I don't really care about whichever aspects you may not. And then you can one-click import straight into UE. And then the final part of that is Quixel Mixer. And Quixel Mixer allows you to get those, get your assets and paint away and incorporate Megascans and straight into the painting of those assets, which is really exciting. And it's completely free for Unreal Engine users. So you can go through that entire repository and you can browse for anything that you may want. And it's very, very powerful. So next up we have Quixel Mixer. Now, I mentioned it before, but I kind of want to quickly just touch on one thing, and that is you may be sitting there going, hey, Chris, that's cool, but I want to do a stylized project. What am I going to do? Well, it's noteworthy that Quixel Mixer assets, you can get them, and you can run Quixel Megascans, you can then bring into Quixel Mixer, and I could then do a palette swap. I could bring in the rock scans from a different biome and switch this up. Or I could run other filters to kind of create a far more stylized asset and generally just kind of lower the amount of work required for a team to really fill out their world. Now, obviously there's a lot of stuff to cover here. Now, I quickly want to just touch on some of the training that will be occurring throughout the next 2 weeks. So we have quite a few sessions. First off, we have interior environments. And interior environments is going to be stepping through just the fundamental controls in Unreal. So how to pilot the scene, move your camera around, click things, and et cetera, et cetera. Now, the next aspect of that is sorry about that. So the next aspect of that is kind of filling those out, meshing, and lighting the scene itself. So we're going to be covering the static lighting fundamentals and Blueprint basics as well. Now, Blueprint is Unreal Engine's scripting language. So we're going to look at just how to set up little things like flickering lights and setting up little piping tools. So I can easily just lay down a spline and run a mesh over the course of that entire thing. We're going to be looking at the basics of material fundamentals too. And finally, we're going to be having both the basics of Quixel as well as ray tracing there as well. So when it comes to ray tracing, I'm actually going to be passing over Alex, and he'll be just going through the basics of how to get real-time ray tracing working inside of these setups. After the interior environments webinar, we have the outdoor environments webinar. So the outdoor environments webinar is going to involve creating large open worlds. We're going to be looking at the landscape tools and the foliage tools, so you can just paint trees in. One of the really cool things that we're going to be touching on is procedural foliage tools. And how this works is, while a foliage tool is used for painting trees in, procedural foliage tool lets you actually set up rule sets to say, hey, this tree distributes this many this many seeds, and these trees can only grow in the shade, etc., etc. And what actually happens is it then just generates the forest for you, which is really, really cool, because you can just set up all sorts of kind of rule sets, and quite often procedural foliage can actually end up looking more realistic than something that was painted by an artist, because it kind of followed a level of randomization. And when an artist can kind of then jump in and tweak it and clean it up, it saves a lot of time. Once again, we're going to be leveraging Quixel for big chunks of that, and the final thing we're going to be looking at there is outdoor lighting basics. Now, we have a intro to sequencer session. This is going to be kind of covering the bare bones of sequencer, so just setting up sequencer itself, setting up takes, setting up cameras and various camera settings, and working with VCam. But the session after that will be advanced sequencer and animation. So the advanced sequencer and animation session is going to be touching on some cool stuff. We're going to be looking at using LiveLink for facial animation, so you can just make expressions straight into an iPad. We're going to have control rig, and we're going to look at bringing in Alembic caches, and in general, like looking at the animation import pipelines and how to bring animations into Unreal. The intro to scripting is going to be going through the basics of Blueprint. So this is going to be everything from your project setup and obvious overview to setting up some really basic AI. One of the cool things here is we're going to be looking at setting up a playable character, which has animation blends and rules set up. Now, the reason I bring this up is because excuse me. The reason I bring this up is because you can actually record any character that's being piloted inside of your wit. And what I mean by that is you can set up a character. And let's say we're setting up a car, okay? We could set up a car, pilot the car, drive through the scene, and record everything that it did. We could then restart the scene with the replay of that car involved. And I could then be a different car chasing the first car. I could then restart it again and be another car chasing the first car. And, by the time we're done, we could have 10 or 12 vehicles chasing a first vehicle, and they're all following all of the right rules and setups that they should be, because it's all been recorded from gameplay that's set up, that was based off of physics, and it was based off of animation blending, and it was based off of this, that, and the other. And I think that's really, really exciting to be able to do, because I've used this myself in different occasions. I remember one time someone asked me to, they wanted to get some animated birds into a scene, and I was like, it's probably quicker to just quickly roll some bird AI in 5 or 10 minutes. And then just record what the birds do than it is to animate some birds. And we did, and it worked, and time was saved. The final part of the scripting there is editor utility widgets. So editor utility widgets is going to be looking at using scripting to kind of set up your own little tool sets. Now, the second last session that we'll be running is Intro to VFX. So this is going to be looking at both Cascade and Niagara visual effects. Niagara is Unreal Engine's new visual effects system, but since I expect quite a few people to be leveraging the marketplace for their setups, I am just going to step through Cascade and give people a fundamental overview of how Cascade works. But the lessons I'll be teaching are going to be in Niagara. And this is just so you're not completely left out, in the cold if you choose to leverage off of marketplace for your projects. We're going to be looking at just the fundamentals of Niagara. We're going to be looking at just making explosions and lightning and general particles, so it should be some cool stuff. And finally, we're going to be looking at technical art. So this will be looking at materials and creating some advanced VFX. In the background there, you can see we have a character that's dissolving as they touch the world. So we're going to be looking at how to do that effect in real time and kind of just getting a character and ripping away bits of them. And we're going to be leveraging render targets as well for some pretty cool effects. So the next question to ask is, what about after this? Where do we go? And the first aspect of that is Unreal's online learning. So Unreal's online learning has hundreds of content just completely for free. It's been vetted by Epic, it's broken down by sector, and you can get to it by going to learn.unrealengine.com. When you go to that site, you'll see plenty of lessons, plenty of tutorials that you can just work through. And when you open them up, you'll actually see that what may seem like one video at first is actually an entire series of videos, explaining how to do something and create something, which is really wonderful. So again, it's a free resource. By all means, please check it out. So the next one here is the Unreal Engine Virtual Production white paper. This was a white paper based on early cinematic developed as a Fortnite trailer. It has a breakdown of the tools and formats that we use to create it. And as well as this, it's kind of covering the workflow in general. And it's worth noting that it is a little out of date. It was developed in 2017, but it still has a wealth of content for newcomers. The Virtual Production Field Guide is another really powerful tool to investigate. It covers the overview, common setups, and general information for virtual production. Again, it's free. You can just get it from unrealengine.com/VP Field Guide. But this is really cool because it really has a lot of interviews with reasonably prominent figures in the industry with their experiences with virtual production and explaining what went well and how they worked through it. And it's a really great read. Now, just outside of this program itself, I wanted to touch on Epic Mega Grants. Now, Epic Mega Grants are a $100 million grant fund to support developers doing amazing things. This is pretty cool. So this is actually outside of the training program that we're running at the moment, outside of the short film challenge. But essentially, if you're making something cool, be it a game or a film or a tool or something like that that ties into the Unreal Engine system, check out the Mega Grants program. Because the Mega Grants program is, you can be applying for $20, $30, $50,000 US for a project to get some funding for it, and that's or more, and that it's really great because we can you can get something that was going to be good, and you can just kind of take it to that next level. Now, the other thing that's worth noting here is, UE5 is on the way. We announced it reasonably recently. As far as the tool sets for this, we've got Nanite, which allows for virtualized geometry, which allows us to just get billions and billions of triangles. We have Lumen, which is fully dynamic real-time global illumination. As well as that, there's virtual textures, spatialized audio. It's built on the same feature set as UE4, so it's really just kind of taking it a step further. And I'm super excited because it's building on a solid base, and it's getting over some of those hurdles that have long been considered just borderline insurmountable. Having billions and billions of polys in a real-time environment is incredible. Being able to take a sculpt just straight in without normal maps is wonderful, and then at the same time being able to have fully dynamic real-time global illumination is going to be great. I'm not actually going to play the video for this one because I felt like playing the video through my internet connection would be not really doing it justice. So that's it for the core of today's content. As I said, this was a broad overview before we really kind of step into the main tutorials themselves. But if you need more information, you can contact the ANZ team at sfc-anz@epicgames.com. And it's at this time that I'm going to open up the webinar to have to have the others from ANZ kind of answering some questions. We'll go into a Q&A period. So I'm going to bring in Tony Reed and Alex Stevens. I'll just switch this over. One moment. Okay. Just getting Zoom. There we go. Okay. Go back to the screen. Cool. Hopefully that worked. Alex, have you been kind of going through the Q&A as the session's been going on?
Yes. Give me a tick. I've got to mute myself on the other side. Cool. So there's a lot of questions. However, people just asking about mega grants. As I mentioned before, the mega grants are totally available for people to apply, even if they are doing this project or they're doing this initiative. I don't think we have any specific details. Actually, this might be one for you. There's a question about FBI case solver. 426.
I can't answer any of the 426 stuff. Honestly, my head's been in preparing 16 workshops for folks. So I've had my head in the wrong spot and haven't had a chance to really look at some of the upcoming 426 features. I was like many of the rest of you looking at Unreal Fest online, getting a little envious over some of the things that were being shown off because I was like, I haven't had a chance to play with that yet. Unfortunately, I can't answer any of the, not any, but things like full body IK solvers for 426. I'm sorry.
Yeah, there was no mention of UE being used for VR virtual reality projects. Is this A of the topic? I'm not quite sure.
Is this what, sorry?
Is this A of the topic? I think it's a bit of a typo there. Sorry, is VR part of the discussion in the future?
I'm not quite sure with it. Part of the discussion in what sense I can't
Yeah,
really.
I'm not
Maybe
sure on that one.
Run through some of the other questions that are immediately apparent. If that person can clarify, that'd be.
Any recommendations for channels to follow up for inspiration of or future information?
Yeah, sure. So as far as channels to kind of start following, my suggestion here is there's a couple of official and a couple of unofficial. So the Unreal Engine Virtual Production Facebook group is really, really powerful. The Unreal Engine Australia Facebook group is a great place to find freelancers and resources. But one of the great little communities that, again, unofficial, is the Oceanic Discord. So Alex can provide some links. I guess he already is. Sorry, but the Oceanic Discord is really, really great. There's a lot of folks in there, and there's. After the last session, we saw like 100 people join, so we're expecting there to be quite a lot of virtual production people in there all of a sudden. So by all means, check that one out to have some kind of live discussion as you're trying to solve some of these things. Outside of that, the official channels for kind of picking things up are going to be your forums. We have a thing called Answer Hub, which can be useful for, hey, I've got technical issues. Outside of that, you've then got the docs themselves, as well as the sample projects. So you can examine our sample projects by just going to the Learn tab of the Unreal Engine launcher, and you can go through the docs. It's just docs.unrealengine.com. We have plenty of tutorials and starters, but if I was trying to really get started with the engine, I would probably look at the Unreal Engine's online learning platform, because it's pretty solid and there's a lot of content there. So maybe start there, and then kind of once you feel like you know enough that you can ask the right questions, that's when it's good to start going to docs and looking up very specific things, because you've had something give you the run through. That said, the sessions over the next 2 weeks are kind of designed to do exactly that. So ideally at the end of these webinars that we're running, you'll have seen someone do a lot of this stuff. You'll have a better understanding of how everything fits together and why it fits together in that way. And you'll be able to kind of ask some of those questions yourself and kind of follow on from there.
Cool. Ken Cyrus asks, what would be the entry-level hardware required to get into virtual production?
To get into virtual production. So that kind of depends on which side of VP we're talking. If you're looking at your animations and such, then I guess technically it'd be the minimum specs of Unreal, which I should probably know off the top of my head, but unfortunately I can't tell you exactly what those would be. I want to give a recommendation of a certain card, but all of a sudden I feel like that's dangerous. So generally, if you have a machine that is good enough to run video games at a high level, you can probably run Unreal pretty well to do quite a lot of what we've shown tonight. Now, when it comes to doing some of the stuff like the LED walls and things like that, that's a different ball game. You know, you need to have a couple of beast machines sometimes. You know, if you're going to have a lot of screens set up, but it really depends on the scope of what it is that you're trying to achieve. But for a lot of the animation work, you know, all the demos that I'm running this week are running off my laptop. So all of the live demonstrations of everything except for ray tracing, single tier, are running off my laptop on a 1070 with a reasonable i7 in it. But a 1070 is not complete top of the line card. It's a generation out, and it wasn't even the best of that generation. So, you know, your specs. I'm comfortable throwing this laptop at most projects outside of ray tracing. So that can still be considered pretty good for developing. As long as you've got reasonable amount of RAM, that's really one of those things that can be a bit of a gotcha. Is have good RAM.
Yeah. Hides asks, is Megagrants short films too? How long does it take to get an outcome after applying?
Sure. So Megagrants, the aim is to get back to folks within about 3 months. So sometimes we miss that, but you know, generally it's you aim for the 3-month mark. That said, like how I would personally pitch a lot of the mega grant stuff is you don't really look at it for funding for an entire project as often as you generally look at it as how to make that project a cut above what it was going to be. Yeah, that's not always the case specifically, but it's a good idea to kind of keep that in mind when budgeting and when setting things up. Because if it takes 3 months to kind of get that turnaround, it's a good idea to still have a potential plan of what you're doing and where you're going without necessarily depending on that going through. Because while there is a lot of money there, there's also a lot of applicants. So I can't guarantee everyone that clicks that submit button gets cash, right?
Will Duan asks, is the short film challenge open to people who don't have a developing background? I definitely say yes. This is what we're doing the webinars for. It's basically anyone who's new to the engine can get a good advice and direction for how to learn, especially online learning. People can go there and learn that stuff. And you definitely don't need someone who's, I guess, super fluent in UE. You could start this from scratch and learn it all and still apply to this challenge. There's no restrictions on who can apply.
Yeah, I mean, I think one of the great things here is you're in complete control of the project that you're making, right? And because of that, there's a lot you can do. If you're, let's say you're an animator and you're used to the VFX industry or something like that, there's a lot you can do just straight out of the gate and setting things up and working with cameras and working with scenes. It's really, if you've got if you've got a background as a creative in general, but not necessarily as a game developer, then you're still likely to be able to apply yourself. You still need to have some fundamental understandings of things like just 3D space, moving things around X, Y, and Z. And you still need to have basic understanding of things like, your animatics, so laying down video tracks and things like that, obviously. But by no means do you need to be a game developer to enter this challenge. And honestly, one of the things I'm most excited to see is the projects that get pitched by people that are new to this ecosystem, and they're doing something that might be different because they're just not sure what's normal. And that can always produce some really exciting stuff.
Matthew McNamara asks, is composure covered in the course?
Is composure covered? Composure is not. Although after the last couple of sessions, I'm feeling guiltier and guiltier about that. So between the last 2 sessions. So while we're not covering composure, most of the stuff that we're developing is largely focused on the animation side. So it's it's going to be focusing on setting things up, setting up environments, and setting up characters, animating stuff, etc., etc. But it's not so much going to be focusing on some of the live action green screening and that kind of stuff, unfortunately. If this becomes more of a thing, I'll do my best to have some chats internally, but I can't guarantee anything at this stage.
Spork asked, where can we find these webinars if we missed them? We've actually part of a link that was sent out, and we'll be putting it in this YouTube thing over here as well. They will have links to the previous recordings of the webinar session, including this one. And it'll also contain the schedule of the upcoming webinars and what's next, and the link, the very next one. Just wanted to check in terms of, this is from Marcomatic, just wanted to check in terms of visual direction. Guessing submissions can be anything from photorealistic to stylistic.
Yeah, for sure.
Absolutely.
I mean,
Marco, we're all familiar with your work. Absolutely.
Yanina Salerno asks, can you please go into detail about licenses? What is recommendations for this challenge? And if our project succeeds and goes on to win monetary prizes outside this challenge, is the creator's license enough?
Yeah, I mean, I'll pick that one up. So yeah, the creator's license is the one you use. It's completely free to use. If you go through the challenge and even if you win the grand prize, it remains free to use. I think the only condition within the agreement is that you put UE in the credits. Otherwise, it is entirely yours. You're welcome to keep using it. We're not going to be chasing you for licenses or anything of the sort.
Yeah,
it's free.
You can check this as well. The EULA is available online for you to go through. UnrealEngine.com. You can have a bit of a look at it. One of the great things in the FAQ of that section is that it does have a lot of use cases where it's like, hey, hypothetically, in this situation, how does this apply to me? So hopefully that puts minds at rest.
Now, there's quite a lot of questions about setting up hardware for LED walls, tracking, and stuff like that. We actually have a virtual production field guide that's up around. I think it's here.
Yeah, the field guide was one of the things I covered, and that helps. I would personally also look at some of the work by some of the more prominent figures in the virtual production community at the moment that we're seeing. Matt Workman has some really good how to get things up and started for virtual production. There's a couple of other devs too that have been kind of breaking things down pretty well. Dave McDonnell has been really good with that from Perth. If we're getting more and more of these questions coming through, I'll do my best to see what we can do internally. But again, I kind of can't promise anything at this stage.
Let's have a look. Nicholas Mara asks, how would you budget your time if you were going to create a short film with Unreal Engine? Dev time, animating time, filming, editing, etc.
This is a bit of a how long is a piece of string kind of question. The best way that I can kind of answer that question is, so the dev time, okay, if we assume something is generally kind of by the numbers, you're not going to require any really out there kind of tools that aren't provided inside of the engine, then my best suggestion is you can get a feel for the dev time by reasonably early on just getting some prototypes and experiments up and running. If you find that you're hitting some workflow bottlenecks, and if you find that there's a few things that are just going to be questionable, then that's going to help you get an idea early on of what that dev time side is going to look like. What I mean by that is, as quickly as possible when you've got your scripts, just do a tech pass on it and say which of these things are weird. Because is a character running from A to B? That's fine. Are we blowing something up? Totally fine. Are we going to have dynamic snow deforming around this thing? Okay, that's something that we need to put in some more investigations. So to kind of field this, my best suggestion is just kind of early on. If you look at the timeline that we set up in that early slide, that should give you a pretty good idea of just how long the that early dev cycle kind of is, and how long that lead up to core production is. There's nothing wrong with you kind of prototyping a lot of these effects, because the quicker you can kind of just get those things put in your comfort zone, the quicker you can work through the rest of it. Now, as far as like how quick is it to animate, this kind of depends on you yourself. If you're a skilled animator, then a lot of your animation work should be able to move in reasonably smoothly. If you're if your background is in any of these areas, we're doing our best to kind of facilitate as best we can. So hopefully those areas are going to be smooth. But again, it really depends on your skill set or your studio skill set to give you a firm answer.
Nellie Bell asks, who assesses the applications?
Not me. I am hands up.
And that's a big thing, right? The Australian team will not be doing it. The initial assessment will go through the screen agencies, but all the final decisions will come from Epic. So after the first round, what makes it through the screen agencies gets sent to us, or gets sent to our team in LA, and the final short films get sent straight to LA for assessment. Probably a good time to tell you, because this has not really been made that public. We are actually funding 16 short films and not 8 short films, as I think is probably widely believed. We are definitely guaranteeing 1 short film per state, but we've decided to put a bit of extra money in, and we're funding an extra 8. And like anybody that gets into the program, it'll all be it'll all be done on merit. So we're just kind of looking forward to seeing all the ideas and supporting your growth on that front.
I feel like Tony's stealing my thunder here. I could have put this at the start of this presentation, and he just casually just drops this bomb in the Q&A at the end. I see how this is.
Well, there you go.
It's fine. Any other questions here kind of come through?
No, I think people are just
happy,
excited about the extra the extra teams.
So okay, great. In that case, we'll kind of generally...
Actually, there's one.
Okay.
Creative Frame asks, any suggestions for mocap without a mocap suit or expensive volume setups?
There's actually there's a really good little session that was one of the Unreal Engine live streams that was it was doing mocap on the cheap. I think they were using a VR setup for that, weren't they, Alex? I think it was Alex Pascal and Victor did that session, I think.
Yeah, I think they were using just a Vive with 2 hands and then just using IK to basically fill in the gaps.
So you can do facial capture straight from like an iPad and things like that, or an iPhone, I think 10.
Yeah, I think it's 10 onwards.
So yeah, it kind of depends on the kind of mocap that you're after, if you're talking facial expressions or if you're talking general production. Yeah. So that said, I think one of the demos that's happening in the advanced sequencer course is going to be some really rough mocap coming from a what are the suits called? It's one of the inertial suits, but I can't remember which brand. So I'm not going to say anything just in case. Yeah. Not going to say it just in case. So yeah, I think the intention is to have some demos going there, but that will be with a one of the I believe it's one of the cheaper mocap setups that is being demonstrated on.
Ken Cyrus asks, what kind of roles would need to fill if you would suggest while building this team for virtual production? Animator, developers, whatever.
Yeah, that's a great question. So here's the funny thing. Like, my background is game development, right? When you look at film production, it's funny because with games, the roles that you think of are, really about that interactivity, and it's also really about, is someone going to break this when they jump on something 10 times and turn in a weird way? You know what I mean? Like, there's 1,000,001 different ways that you can break a game. The cool thing with film is there's a healthy level of getting things that look right from a reasonably specific camera angle without having to care too much about things being done necessarily what would be considered right in the game's way. You know, like if we know that the camera is going to always be on this side of an object, we can take a lot of shortcuts. Now, the reason I'm getting at this is because it means that having a skilled animator and like a couple of just like a generalist on board that's able to really just work with pulling in particle effects from the marketplace, or at least warping one that was kind of right into the real thing that you needed. You know, getting people that are able to kind of cobble these things together is really useful to have. So my personal recommendation, you know, I mean, a team could be a large team. You know, you could have dedicated animation, tech art, sound, etc. But I have no doubts that we're going to get quite a few solid submissions from people that are single person teams that are just kind of generalists that are able to kind of work things themselves. But you know, I mean, it really depends on the scope of the project of what you're suggesting. But what I'm kind of getting at here in a very long-winded fashion is don't be afraid to have either a small team or a large team. If you happen to have a specialist animator, then your project is just going to have the ability to have, you know, not having to use smoke and mirrors to kind of cover the animation in some situations, right?
Yeah. Alex Benmar asks, interactive VR projects, are they eligible? I would say that you would need to chat to your screen agencies to see if that is the case, because that's up to their guidelines to determine
Diplomatic
that.
response from Alex. Do you happen to have any word on that one, Tony?
So it was actually me writing in the background. Yeah, you are going to have to check with your screen agency to determine whether they consider VR or the XR platforms as a means of delivering a short film. If they do, we do. We're good.
This is a giant can of worms. Okay.
It might be. Yeah.
We'll see.
We'll see.
Anyone else?
Creative Frame asks, how much VP is happening in Australia at the moment, and any big names to check out?
I think, hello. When it comes to virtual production work that's happening in Australia, there's definitely some public, like smaller operations that have been popping up. As far as anything else, unfortunately, we can't discuss anything that may be going on outside of the public sphere.
Kim Allen asks, can we minimize costing by using existing Unreal assets, sets, props, and so on?
Please.
Yeah. And that includes Marketplace.
Yeah. So we give away a lot of free assets on the Marketplace, so don't feel like you have to necessarily spend money. We're not secretly trying to get you to spend $20,001 on the Marketplace. Make a profit. So there is Marketplace assets, but it's worth noting there's a ton of free content up there already that you could be using for your short films. A while ago, Epic was making a game called Paragon. Paragon was released, and it was a good game. It was a beautiful game, but unfortunately it was sunset, and when it was, all of the characters, including their audio, animation, and effects, not all of their audio, I think the non-union audio was put online for free. So it's like millions of dollars of free character assets that you can kind of pull apart and examine. Now, I would strongly recommend looking at them, even if you don't want to use them. I would strongly recommend you still poke at them a bit. And the reason is these are like shipped high quality AAA assets. So it can give you an idea of how things were set up to achieve certain effects and how to kind of get everything together. So I would strongly consider sussing it out.
There's one very specific one. What hardware is needed to attach to a professional camera for real-time background tracking?
So I've seen that being done from, like, you can go the expensive ways, right? But I've actually seen people do a lot of this stuff with just calibrating a Vive puck pretty well, or even a Vive controller. That's my personal favorite, because it's They didn't shell out for the puck. They were just like, nah, we can just gaffer a controller.
It's like the turtle with the gun on the back, right?
It looks a bit strange. But I mean, at the end of the day, what you're mostly trying to get to, like what you're mostly trying to get from your setup is transformation data. The more you want to get from that, then the more expensive or elaborate your setup, I should say, may need to be. So you might need to start looking into ways that you can pull lens data or something like that. But I have seen that done on reasonably cheap setups.
Another question that's probably related to the VR interactive stuff, but in the same kind of camp. But Nicholas Mauer asks, does short film have to be single screen? Can it be VR, multi-screen, immersive dome, etc.? And there's another question that's similar. Is this grant limited to short films only, or will the scope expand into live music virtual production? For example, the Katy Perry XR stage performance. Let's say that's probably a Tony question.
Tony question.
Tony question. Okay, so on the first one, again, it's going to be down to the guidelines of the screen agencies and what they, in the formats they consider for this particular challenge, how they'd want it delivered. On the second one, no. This is a short film where we are looking for contained narratives that you can build on. The idea was never that it was going to be a one-off thing. What we really wanted to do was empower you to kind of unleash a creative muscle and go for it and not be limited by the guidelines that are typically in place. What we actually want to see you do here is create things that will go beyond the challenge, and you can actually build on, market, grow, turn into a series, turn into a feature film. I mean, that's ideally where we'd like to see you go. I think on that broadcast and doing things in the music video space, that's obviously of interest to us. You've mentioned products that we're kind of loosely involved in anyway. That might be another discussion.
Adam Moorhead asks, as a filmmaker who's total beginner to animation, what would be the extent of animation VFX in UE that we're expected to use? E.g., if I mainly filmed live action but added elements in post in UE.
I mean, one of the interesting things here, and this is purely from a creative endeavor, like, you can tell a really, really pretty story. You can tell a really interesting narrative and a pretty hard-hitting narrative with very little to no animation, right? Like, you can tell a story without a character in some ways. Not in some ways, like, it's doable. So, I mean, like, look at what you've got, look at who you're working with, look at where your skill sets are, and do your best to kind of fit that into a project that fit both, allows you to execute something that you think is hits the right level of vision, but also works to the talent that you have available. So, like, I wouldn't be too stressed. It's, how do I phrase this? Poor animation is only going to stand out if your project is really highlighting the animation in a lot of ways. Do you know what I mean? Like, if you're shooting it, if you've chosen a story that is that is relying on the animation and showing it off, then that's going to be a thing. But what you choose to tell is going to be a huge help on that side of things. And keep in mind that, when we do bring up the animation specifically, it's worth noting that, you can bring those animations straight in from other tool sets. So if you have someone that is talented with Maya or Max or Blender, then, those talents should still be able to shine through inside of the engine.
Yeah. Another question is probably more like a choose your poison kind of deal. But Latario Lau asks, do you recommend recording mocap directly in Unreal or using any other middleware?
I think we have frame syncing in there as of 4.2.4. I believe that came in.
I think so.
My understanding that that's the case, so my gut feeling says it's probably okay either way. But I can't answer that question 100% confidently without verifying the input pipeline. Because while I'm reasonably sure that the mocap data as it comes into Unreal includes the delta time so that hiccups don't really cause too much of a problem, I'm not 100% sure on that. So I don't want to give you a thumbs up that is something that I still needs to just be verified. Like, I don't want to mislead anyone. Sorry.
I think that's pretty much it.
Cool. So, in that case, we'll be winding up. I just before we all go, once again, my apologies. There's been a couple of issues. It turns out that one of the hyperlinks that was submitted, the hyperlink in the PDF was fine, but apparently the hyperlink, if you clicked it instead of copying and pasting it in the raw email, had some issues. So my apologies to everybody with regards to that. For what it's worth, the setup that we're going through here with YouTube was not the intended one a week ago. We had a nice learning portal set up and everything was going to be smooth, sunshine, lollipops, the whole deal. And then we saw how many people responded to the applications, and it just it was great. We're really excited to see so many people register. A little terrified, but excited. And what that kind of meant was, unfortunately, the platforms we'd been looking at didn't support the numbers that we needed. But fortunately, YouTube does. So we had to change it for at least these initial sessions. We're looking at what we can do moving forward, and we're doing our best to, at the moment, we've got a middle ground with the box is now reflecting previous sessions and such, but we're doing our best to assess how we can continue this for the rest of the short film challenge and keep information and updates coming through to people. And we'll let you know more when we have some stuff locked down.
Cool.
Well, in that case, we'll wind it up. Oh, Alex looks like
There's
really
a question.
question.
Yanina Salerno asks, is there a Facebook group where we can look to collab with others?
So Unreal Engine Australia is pretty good for that. There is, again, the Unreal Engine VP group, but I probably wouldn't look for collab opportunities in the VP group. Unreal Engine Australia or the Discord. Like the Discord was brought up before. It's a great community, and I think, look, if there's a lot of you, I could be wrong here, but my gut feeling says we're really going to have two kinds of devs, two kinds of people in the webinar, right? We're going to have people that are looking to make something, and they're also like, yeah, but now I need to Unreal. And then we're going to have Unreal devs who are like, this is cool, how do I get involved? Bringing those two together is always going to be important. And I think the Unreal Engine, like the Oceanic groups and things like that, are really good for having a chat where you can be like, hey, I'm working on this, or hey, has anyone got this kind of skill set? So that's a really good place for some of the non-UE people to kind of meet some more of the UE people and get into some discussions. I believe there's now a virtual production room on the thing. Great.
Yep.
So having some chats there, and I think the short film challenge as well is another space inside of there.
Short film in general. And
Yeah. So my suggestion would be looking there. And this is an unofficial pathway, but it's a pretty useful one that's mostly local. So it seems like a good spot. Otherwise, there is the Unreal Engine forums. There's a job board, I believe, on the forums, and a few things like that you could potentially be using. But I'd probably look at the Discord, which I believe Alex just posted into the chat again. Yep. You can see the reflection in your eyes. Okay. Well, in that case, thank you everybody for coming. I hope this has been useful, and I hope to see some more of you in the sessions that are coming up. The webinars that we have on tomorrow are the interior environment and the outdoor environment. So once again, that'll be more of a live training than a PowerPoint presentation. So it'll be just a stream of me building things, explaining the hows and whys. We'll have Alex there asking questions and doing our best to kind of fill things out as we go along. The Q&A for that is kind of going to be a lot more as we're going along. To kind of keep a reasonably dynamic pace for things. The assets we're leveraging for tomorrow's sessions are all free assets. However, we're not going to be doing it as a follow along kind of session, because with such limited time, if everyone's following along and you got to wait for anyone that's having any issues, unfortunately, we just wouldn't be able to get through the breadth of content that we really want to get through. So hopefully people are able to kind of scrub back through some of this stuff and doing our best to explain it along the way. You can kind of get the key takeaways and then follow that through with the Unreal Engine learning platform yourselves. So thank you all very much for your time. I hope this has been informative, and looking forward to hearing from some of you in the future. Take care.
Cheers.